In 1983, a mother in Oregon drove to a hospital with her 3 children wounded in the car and claimed they had been attacked by a stranger on a dark rural road. Her name was Diane Downs, and at first, the story she told sounded like a terrifying random crime. She said a man with shaggy hair had tried to hijack her car, then shot her and her children before disappearing into the night. But almost immediately, investigators and hospital staff noticed something that felt wrong. Her behavior did not seem to match the horror of what had supposedly happened. Her daughter Cheryl died, her son Danny was left paralyzed, and her daughter Christy survived with severe injuries. As police looked deeper, the stranger story began to collapse. Evidence did not support the version Diane had given, and investigators eventually focused on her obsession with a married man named Robert Knickerbocker, who had made it clear he did not want the responsibilities that came with her children. What makes Diane Downs especially disturbing is not only the crime, but the way she later presented herself in interviews.
We were just out, I guess, sightseeing, I guess you'd say. And the kids got tired. They fell asleep in the car, so I decided to just head on home. But I saw a road I hadn't been on before. We like to take back roads, and just went down that road, and there was a guy standing in the road, flagging me down, so I stopped. If I had shot my own children, would I not have done a good job of it? Why would I have taken my kids to the hospital? Wouldn't I have made sure they were dead and then cried crocodile tears? That's insane to think that I would do such a thing and then bring the witnesses in against myself. That's crazy. Christy woke up, and as I say, she may be the only one to get me out of this. Would I have brought her to the hospital? Wouldn't she be the one that I would make sure is dead? There are too many holes in it.
Instead of appearing like a mother destroyed by what had happened, she often came across as strangely composed, smiling, singing, and speaking in ways that many viewers found deeply unsettling.
When this man shot my daughter, my first reaction was to snap back to my childhood, to the pain that had happened to me back then, my marriage, my entrapment by society. This man was bigger than me. He was stronger than me. He had more power because he had a gun. And I stood there and I looked at Christy reaching, and the blood that just kept gushing out of her mouth. What do? Everybody says you sure were lucky. Well, I don't feel very lucky. I couldn't tie my damn shoes for about 2 months. It is very painful. It is still painful. The scar is going to be there forever. I'm going to remember that night for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. I don't think I was very lucky. I think my kids were lucky. If I had been shot the way they were, we all would have died. You can't replace children, but you can replace the effect that they give you. And they give me love, they give me satisfaction, they give me stability. They give me a reason to live and a reason to be happy, and that's gone. They took it from me. But children are so easy to conceive. At night, when I close my eyes, I can see Christy reaching her hand out to me while I'm driving, and the blood just keep coming out of her mouth. And that, maybe it'll fade too with time, but I don't think so. That haunts me the most.
Her interviews became part of the public fascination with the case because they seemed to reveal a disconnect between the image she wanted to project and the reality of what her children had suffered. In front of cameras, Diane continued trying to shape the story around herself, but the facts told a different version. She had not been the victim of a random attack. She was convicted of shooting her children and attempting to build a false narrative around it. And that is why her interviews are so chilling. They show someone not simply accused of a terrible crime, but someone still trying to control how the world sees her, even after the people who suffered most were her own children. But while Diane Downs used interviews to shape herself into the victim of her own story, the next killer did something different. He sat in front of a camera decades later and spoke about his crimes with a calmness that made them feel even more disturbing. In the 1970s, a quiet community in Titusville, Florida, was terrorized by the disappearance and murder of young women who had been hitchhiking through the area. The man eventually responsible was Bernard Eugene Giles, who was only 20 years old when he killed 5 young women over a 3-month period in 1973. Years later, Piers Morgan sat across from him in prison for confessions of a serial killer. And what made the interview so disturbing was this was a man who, on the surface, could speak in a steady voice and appear almost harmless while describing crimes that had devastated families forever. That is why the interview is, while the reality of what he had done was horrifying.
You lost a wife, you lost your daughter.
I lost everything.
You lost...
The disturbing part of Bernard Giles is not only that he killed 5 women, emptiness towards something even more intimate and violating. This interview comes from a disturbing psychological documentary that examined the minds of sexual offenders and the way certain predators think, speak, and rationalize what they have done. The documentary featured several interviews, but one man, identified only as Robert, stood out because of how calmly he described his crimes. He was not presented as someone losing control or breaking down under guilt. Instead, he appeared composed, controlled, and almost emotionally untouched by the reality of what he had done.
It started at about the age of 1. When I was the punisher, I was the one who decided punishment over the children. I was the one who spanked the children. I was the one who punished the children.
Robert had abused his own stepdaughter. But what made the interview so unsettling was not only the crime itself, it was the way he spoke about it.
I would tell myself, well, she's not going to be like that. She is going to be the perfect mate. And I told myself that. And I didn't molest her then.
The perfect mate.
The perfect
So
mate. I was grooming her to fit me. Then when I molested her at 18 months old. And I thought to myself, I said, well, this is going to be easy. This is going to be easy. I'm going to have my own child, my own stepdaughter, which is really not blood related to me. And I'm telling myself these things, it's not blood related to me. When she grows up to be 14, 15 years old, I will have the perfect sexual mate for sexual purposes. Anything else didn't matter. It was sex. That was it. I didn't care about, really, honestly, I didn't love the child. I wanted the child for my own purposes, you know, and treating them like a person, but they were just objects.
There was no visible shame that matched the damage he caused, no clear emotional collapse, and no sense that he was carrying the full weight of another person's trauma. He seemed detached, as if he were explaining a thought process rather than confronting the suffering behind it. That is what makes the footage so difficult to watch.
The best way to fool people is to help them, is to ask what they want, ask what they need. Do they need any help doing anything? Do they need any money, or do they need their car fixed? Do they need the grass cut? Do they need their children looked out for? Do they need anything to get them to think that I am a decent person and want to help? Trust me, I will help. And yeah, that was manipulation all the way.
Most people expect guilt to reveal itself somehow, even if only through discomfort, hesitation, or silence. But Robert's calmness creates a different kind of fear. It suggests someone who may understand that what he did was wrong, but does not appear to feel it in the way most people would. And that is often what makes psychopathic behavior so disturbing. It is not always dramatic. It does not always look like rage, panic, or madness. Sometimes it looks ordinary. Sometimes it speaks in a normal voice. Sometimes it sits in front of a camera and describes cruelty without seeming truly shaken by it. In Robert's case, the horror is not only that he harmed someone vulnerable, but that he could talk about it with such unnerving control. Now, from a man who seemed detached from the harm he caused, we move to someone who understood trust well enough to weaponize it. In 1985, an 8-year-old girl named Rima Traxler disappeared while walking home from school in Longview, Washington. Her family feared the worst, but they also trusted the people around them, including a family friend named Joseph Condro, who appeared to be helping during the search. That detail is what makes this case so disturbing. Condro was not a stranger lurking at the edge of the story. He was someone close enough to the family to understand their trust, their routines, and even the safety word Rima had been taught to protect herself. Years later, he confessed that he used that knowledge to lure her away.
Yeah, I knew Kara for a while. We'd play cards together and stuff.
How would you describe her person? I mean, as a kid?
She was very energetic, but she was very defiant too when she believed in things. That morning when I woke up, I knew what I was going to do. I was completely aware of what I wanted to do. I drove to the school and I pulled into the parking lot. Kara jumped in my car.
What's the exchange between you and her? And
there wasn't really much of an exchange. I just drove her out to the house, and we talked a little bit.
But happy, though, right? I mean, it's not, she doesn't know she's in danger.
No, she doesn't know she's, like I said, I was playing on my victim's trust. And that's a big thing, you know, when you do these kind of crimes, is the person has to trust you for you to lure them in.
For years, Rima's family lived without the full truth. Condro remained hidden behind the role of someone familiar, someone who should have been safe. But in 1999, while facing trial for the murder of 12-year-old Cora Rudd, he finally admitted what he had done to Rima.
Why a child? I mean, what's the motive behind this?
I think it's just the convenience of the situation. You know, children are very trusting, and I was very close to their family members, and you know, I played their trust.
Basically, it's an easy target.
It was an easy target at the time, yeah.
What finally was the stressor that you're going to commit a crime, and it's going to be this child, or, you know, Rima?
It was an impulsive reaction, so I just, you know, I went down, took her down to my house, and I told her to stay in the pickup, and I went in the house. I called work and said I wouldn't be in that day, and drove her out to Germany Creek and raped and murdered her.
At what point it really kind of tipped you over where now you began to act out the fantasies?
I don't know, 13, maybe 12, 13 years old. One night there was this girl that was working at a local neighborhood store, and I went to the store after they shut down at 11 o'clock, and I asked her for a ride, and she said sure, and she got me into her car, and you know, I pulled a knife on her and stuff. She cried and stuff like that, and please don't do this, please don't do this, and I didn't do it. I didn't go through with it, no.
So you stopped, you felt sorry for her?
Yeah, I did.
You didn't expect her to cry, you didn't expect her to react that way?
Yeah.
And it was kind of a turn-off?
Later I overcame those, you know, feelings. My fantasy was just to rape and murder my victims. That was the whole fantasy part of it. The police department, investigations, that was part of it, but my murders, you know, they were like the high point. The fantasy is only a motivation. There's nothing better than the act itself.
Had you not been identified, would you have kept going?
Yeah.
You would have kept killing?
Yeah. I felt real comfortable about killing. I mean, killing for me was just like second nature now. I just kept on going.
No regrets back to 1985 with your first victim? Any regrets there?
No.
How about 1996?
Yeah, I would have took her out to a different spot.
So she wouldn't have been found?
Well, that was the idea. That was the intention.
He was sentenced to 55 years in prison, but investigators believed there may have been more victims. That possibility made his death in 2012 feel like another injustice, because whatever secrets he still had died with him. The tragedy of Joseph Condro's case is not only that he killed children, it is that he used trust as the weapon. He understood how to make himself seem harmless, and that made him even more dangerous. Joseph Condro used familiarity to gain access to his victims. But the next case shows a different kind of manipulation. Not one person pretending to be safe, but an entire belief system built to make violence feel justified. Susan Atkins became known as one of the most infamous members of the Manson family, a group whose crimes would become part of America's darkest criminal history. But before her name was connected to murder, Atkins was a young woman searching for direction, belonging, and meaning. That made her exactly the kind of person Charles Manson knew how to manipulate. He did not simply attract followers. He reshaped the way they saw the world, slowly pulling them away from ordinary reality and replacing it with his own violent beliefs. Atkins became deeply devoted to Manson and eventually came to believe he was more than just a man. To her, he was almost a spiritual figure, someone whose words carried absolute meaning. So, when Manson began speaking about an approaching apocalyptic conflict, she did not reject it as fantasy. She accepted it. Inside the closed world of the group, his delusions became their truth, and his commands became something they were willing to obey. By the summer of 1969, that devotion had turned dangerous. On August 8th, Atkins joined Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian as they went to 10050 Cielo Drive in Los Angeles, the home where actress Sharon Tate was staying. What happened that night became one of the most infamous murder cases in American history.
What happened that night you all went to Sharon Tate's house? What really happened?
Well, I remember getting in the car with Tex and Tex Watson and my other two co-defendants. And we drove to the house with instructions to kill everyone in the house.
From Charlie?
Yeah. And not just that, but that we were instructed to go all the way down every house, hit every house on the
street?
On the street, yes.
And kill all the people in those houses? Kill all the people
in all those houses. And we went into the house, and I remember that as we went in, a car came up to the driveway, and I remember Tex getting out, and without saying anything, there were gunfire shot. I was in the bushes, and
that's when the young boy Stephen Parent was killed.
He was killed
in the car outside.
Right.
5 people were killed, including Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant. The crime shocked the world not only because of its brutality, but because of how senseless it seemed. These murders were not committed for money or survival. They were committed by people who had surrendered themselves to a belief system built around one man's control. And Atkins's role in that night made her one of the most disturbing figures connected to the case.
The people in the house were all brought into the living room and tied up, and I remember that Wojtek Bakowski, I believe is his name, I had tied his hands with a towel and then was instructed to kill him. And I raised the knife that I had in my hand, and I couldn't put the knife down. I couldn't bring it down. It was just as though there was a force there that held my wrist, and I couldn't move. And as he saw that I couldn't move, then he very easily undid the ties, the towel that I had tied his wrist with, and he and I began to fight. And I remember I was screaming for help, and he was screaming for help, and then Tex came and helped me, and I was left to sit and watch Sharon Tate. And about that time, all I can remember seeing people just scattering in different places and running in different places, and I was left sitting with Sharon Tate, and she was talking to me, and I remember that I had absolutely, I felt nothing. I felt absolutely nothing for her as she begged for her life and for the life of her baby.
Years later, Atkins claimed she had changed. In prison, she spoke about faith, remorse, and redemption, presenting herself as someone transformed from the person she had once been.
In this room were all the survivors of those victims, of yours and the others, their families and their friends. What would you say to them?
Say what I would have to say to them. I just love them. I feel for them. I feel their pain. I feel their sorrows and their loss. And I didn't feel that years ago. I didn't feel anything for them.
But her story still leaves behind a question that is impossible to answer cleanly. When someone helps create that much suffering, can they ever truly become someone else? Or does the violence they took part in remain a permanent part of who they are? One thing is for sure, Susan Atkins' crimes grew out of manipulation, belief, and surrendering herself to someone else's control. But the next case is different. This was not cult influence. This was personal revenge, carried out with full awareness of the pain it would create. In 2001, a custody dispute in Texas escalated into one of the most disturbing acts of revenge in modern criminal history. At the center of it was John Battalia, a father of two whose relationship with his ex-wife, Mary Jean Pearl, had already been defined by years of abuse, control, and ongoing conflict. Even after their separation, the situation between them never truly settled. Like many cases involving domestic violence, the end of the relationship did not mean safety. Tension remained, fueled by legal battles, restrictions, and a growing sense of resentment. And over time, that resentment began to turn into something far more dangerous. Battalia understood exactly what would hurt Mary Jean the most. He knew that if he wanted to cause lasting damage, he did not need to target her directly. He could reach her through the people she loved most, their daughters, faith, and liberty. During what was supposed to be a routine visit, he brought the girls back to his apartment, creating what appeared to be a normal moment between a father and his children. But behind that normality, there was a plan. Instead of returning them safely, Battalia called their mother. What followed was not just an act of violence, but something designed to leave a permanent psychological scar. He forced Mary Jean to listen as the situation unfolded, turning her into a witness to something no parent should ever have to hear. The cruelty of the crime was not only in what he did, but in how deliberately he chose to do it. Prosecutors later described it as revenge. Not just an attack, but a calculated attempt to create lifelong suffering. Years later, when Battalia was interviewed while awaiting execution, what unsettled many people was the emotional distance he seemed to maintain.
Oh, when I attacked Michelle, I wouldn't really call it an attack. Went up to her when she was walking down the sidewalk, and I said, "You're going to have to learn this lesson." And I just held her by the shoulder, and I popped her in the head twice. And she moved her head the wrong way, and I snapped her nose. And she fell down, and I just walked away. She said I struck her about 20 times, but she was unconscious before she hit the ground. Well, the practice she got me put in prison. She knows that the bullshit she pulled, the only way to keep from sending her front teeth flying out her asshole is to have me behind this glass. Because she's a bitch, and she deserved to have the shit knocked out of her, but what the hell.
And when you think about that incident, how does that make you feel?
Makes me feel like I should have killed her. She's such a pain in the ass. Do I think I was a good father to liberty and faith? Yes, I mean, I tried to be. Oh, gosh. My fondest memory of my daughters, well, I have another daughter. She's 30 now, Christy.
All right, two.
When we used to all get together and go somewhere, it was a kind of a little bit of a three-ring circus, if you can imagine. 3 highly energetic, fun little girls just having a great time. Oh, how did Faith and Liberty die? They said they died of gunshot wounds.
So there's nothing about that you remember?
Not particularly, no.
I think it was the police called us and said that they had
they had found him. But he had gone and picked up a girlfriend right after that, and then went next door to a tattoo parlor and had 2 roses in barbed wire tattooed on his arm for faith and liberty.
Yeah, the night that I was arrested, I had the roses.
Do they have any significance?
Yeah, I love roses.
There was no clear moment of collapse, no visible weight that matched the scale of what he had done. Just a sense of detachment that made the reality of the crime feel even more disturbing. In 2018, nearly 17 years after the murders, John Battalia was executed by lethal injection. But for Mary Jean Pearl, the impact of that decision did not end there, because what he set out to do was never just about that moment. It was about what she would be forced to live with long after it. Battalia's crime was intimate and personal, designed to devastate one woman forever. But the next killer turned violence into a public identity, using fear almost like a signature. For more than 30 years, Wichita, Kansas lived with the fear of a killer who seemed to appear, disappear, and then return whenever he wanted attention. He called himself BTK, a name he created from the phrase bind, torture, kill. And that name alone showed something deeply disturbing about him. He was not only committing murders, he was building an identity around them. The man behind BTK was Dennis Rader. To the people around him, he did not look like a monster hiding in plain sight. He was a husband, a father, a church president, a former compliance officer, and someone who seemed like part of everyday community life. He went to work, attended church, raised children, and lived in the same city where police were searching for one of the most feared killers in Kansas history. That contrast is what makes his case so unsettling. Rader was not living on the outside of society. He was inside it, carefully hiding behind responsibility, routine, and normal appearances. His first known murders happened on January 15, 1974, when he entered the home of the Otero family. Joseph and Julie Otero, along with 2 of their children, Joseph Jr. and Josephine, were killed inside the house.
So anyway, they became a potential target.
So they were convenient.
Convenient.
How did they fuel the sexual fantasy then? Was there anything specific about that?
Mrs. Otero was attractive, and then I saw Josephine too, and the door opened. So here I am, you know. So do I just walk out the back door, they call the police, or I go for it? And I went for it. I went in, I think it was a younger Otero. They were all in the kitchen, they were making sandwiches.
Male or female?
No, it was the younger, the junior, Joseph. Mr. Otero actually stepped up and told him I was coming for some food. I was wanted in California, I needed some food and water and some money and transportation. That was my ruse to kind of calm him down. He kind of laughed a little bit, and he said, "Well, this is a joke. You know, who said you were my brother-in-law?" And that's probably was their demise. If they probably struggled and fought with me, that would have been a different story. But they felt fairly comfortable, so that's what I was going to do. Okay. Well, I'm a bad guy. I care for people. You know, I have concerns for people. So. And I hadn't really crossed that path yet where I was going to kill the people yet, so I was in still in concern mode. And then went in the other room and I thought, do I just leave or what? They already know me, my face, so I went back and put a plastic bag over Mr. Otero's head and put a garment over his neck and pulled up on it, and that's when it really hit the fan then, because they all could see what I was doing.
And kids were watching this?
Yes, they were watching it. They were screaming and hollering.
Did you want to move them from the scene at all?
No.
I
had to get in control. It was really noisy. They were screaming and
the noise was bothering you.
Yeah, the noise was bothering me, and I knew the mailman would be out there or somebody would be walking by, so I had to control it very quickly. It was just something that I had to do. Once I started with Mr. Otero, I knew I had to do all 4 of them.
It was a crime that devastated the family and shocked the community. But at that time, no one fully understood that it was only the beginning. The surviving children were left with a scene no child should ever have to face. and Wichita was left with the realization that someone capable of extreme cruelty was moving among them unnoticed. After the Otero murders, Rader continued killing over the years, choosing victims, stalking them, and treating the crimes as part of a private fantasy he had been building in his own mind.
Sexual fantasy is if I'm going to kill a victim or do something to a victim, is have them bound and tied. Now, somewhere along the line, in my dreams, I have what they call torture chambers, and to relieve your sexual fantasies, you have to go to the kill. And I don't think it was actually the person that I was after. I think it was the dream. I know that's not really nice to say about a person, but they were basically an object. They were just an object. That's all it were. I had more satisfaction building up to it and afterwards than I did the actual killing of the person.
It almost sounds like that's something separate and apart, like a different person.
Yeah, it's part of the compartment. I can switch back and forth, and once this character takes over, whatever it is, it drives me onward.
You can't stop it.
I can't stop it. It's just, it controls me. You know, it's like it's in the driver's seat.
But what separated him from many other killers was his need to communicate. He wanted recognition. He sent letters to police and the media, describing himself through the BTK name and making sure the city knew he was still there. It was not enough for him to commit the crimes in secret. He wanted fear to spread beyond the homes he entered. Then, for years, he seemed to vanish. The killings stopped, and Wichita was left with uncertainty. Some wondered if BTK had died, moved away, or simply chosen to stop. But the truth was even more disturbing. Dennis Rader was still living an ordinary life, still surrounded by people who had no idea who he really was. He was attending church meetings, spending time with his family, and blending into the same community he had terrorized. In the early 2000s, after decades of silence, Rader resurfaced. But he did not return because the police had found him. He returned because he wanted to be remembered. He began sending messages again, almost as if the world moving on from BTK was something he could not tolerate. That need for attention became the mistake that finally exposed him. One of his final communications included a floppy disk. Rader believed he could trust the police when they indicated the disk could not be traced, but hidden inside the file was metadata that pointed investigators toward Christ Lutheran Church and the name Dennis. From there, the pieces began to close in. Investigators connected the information to Dennis Rader, then used DNA evidence linked through his daughter to confirm what they had uncovered. The revelation was almost impossible for his family to process. The man they knew as a father, husband, and church leader was the same man responsible for murders that had haunted Wichita for decades. That is one of the most disturbing parts of the BTK case. The double life was not a small disguise. It lasted for years. It survived inside a marriage, a family, a church, and a community that believed they knew him. In 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested, and the man who had spent decades hiding behind the BTK name was finally exposed. But in the end, he was not caught because he made a mistake during one of the murders. He was caught because his ego pulled him back into the spotlight. He wanted control over the story. He wanted attention. He wanted the name BTK to matter again. And that need to be seen became the one thing he could not control. BTK hid for decades behind the image of an ordinary family man. But in the next case, the mask slipped in public, outside a theater, before anyone truly understood what they had just prevented. In 1989, what first looked like an attempted abduction outside a theater in Washington quickly exposed something far darker. The man involved was Wesley Allen Dodd, a repeat child predator who, at the time of his arrest, was not yet known to police as one of the most dangerous offenders in the region. On the night of November 13th, Dodd attempted to take a young boy from the New Liberty Theater in Camas, Washington. The child managed to resist, and the situation drew attention before Dodd could get away. A man connected to the boy's family followed him, restrained him, and held him until police arrived. At first, it may have seemed like a frightening but isolated incident. But once investigators began looking closer, they realized they had not just stopped a predator in the middle of a crime. They had uncovered a serial child killer. Dodd had already murdered 3 young boys, and his arrest prevented what could have become another tragedy.
I kidnapped 3 little boys, a 4-year-old, 10-year-old, and 11-year-old. 2 of them were raped, and then I killed all 3 of them. I didn't just go out and start killing. Everything started happening when I was just 13 years old. See, things kept progressing. I kept getting away with all these crimes. Well, I was going to try to do a little bit more. I was enjoying what I was doing. At the time, I was laughing at them. I mean, hey, you know, great, I could do anything I want. Anything. So that was my original reason for killing, was so that they couldn't report what I'd done, who had done it. But I wasn't sure I could kill, so in my mind, I had to make that exciting. I had to fantasize about it, and to be able to kill, I had to make that thought exciting. And in a matter of just a couple of weeks, I was able to do that, and I was ready to kill. I wanted to kill. I told him, okay, there's just one more thing I want to do before I let you guys go. I pulled the knife back out of my sock, reached over and stabbed Billy near the younger one. Got him in the stomach. I didn't see the knife go in. I don't know if I felt more than saw that I'd hit him. I don't know. I knew I'd stabbed him, but wasn't sure exactly where. I knew it was in the stomach area. And then I turned to Cole and started stabbing him before he could get away. I stabbed Cole 3 times. Billy had gotten up and ran. I caught him, stabbed him 2 more times, and as I was stabbing him, as I caught him and stopped him, he told me, "I'm sorry." After all that had happened, all planning and fantasies and everything, I can't believe I actually did it. I actually killed somebody. I killed 2 little boys. And I just became obsessed with it at that point. I mean, that is all I thought about. Every minute I was awake, I had dreams about it. At work, that's all I thought about. And it was only 7 weeks after I'd murdered the 2 Near brothers that I went into Portland, found a 4-year-old boy, kind of off by himself, asked him if he wanted to play some games, have some fun. He wasn't sure about it, but I reached out my hand, and just kind of an automatic response, he reached out and took my hand. And that was it. He went with me. So I took Lee Isley back to my apartment. This was on October 29th. Immediately had him take his clothes off, tied him to the bed, took a photograph of him tied up, let him loose, told him, okay, now I'm going to teach you how to make love like grown-ups do. About 3 o'clock or so in the morning, while I was molesting him, I kind of whispered in his ear, "I'm going to kill you in the morning." I wasn't sure if he was even awake when I said it, but he kind of mumbled, "What?" And I repeated it. I said, "I'm going to kill you in the morning." And he said, "No, you're not." And I said, "Okay, I won't." I thought about tying him up and gagging him and leaving him there while I was at work. And again, the landlady might come in and find him. So I decided, well, I have to do it now. I have to kill him now. And with my right hand, I started choking him. Using the rope, I lifted him up and carried him over to my bedroom closet, pushed the clothes aside, and tied the ends of the rope around the bar in the closet and left him hanging there while I got ready for work. I started writing about cannibalism, kidnapping, moving to a different place where I could kidnap kids and keep them and use them for as long as I wanted. I'd have kept on doing it, and the things I would have done would have been even worse than murder. Hanging, that's the way I'm going to go. I'm going to hang, because that's the way Lee Isley died. I don't think I deserve a neat, clean, painless little death. Actually, it's not really that I want to die as much as I know I have to, because I know I won't stop killing.
What makes his case especially disturbing is how ordinary the moment of capture appeared compared to what was later revealed. A broken-down car, a theater, a quick confrontation on the street, and behind it, the hidden history of someone who had been targeting children for years. In 1993, Dodd was executed by hanging after requesting that method himself. But the most haunting part of the case is not how it ended. It is how close he came to disappearing back into the night before anyone understood who they had really caught. Now that was all for today, folks. If you enjoyed these horrifying clips, click to see more on the video on screen.